A very good evening to you and many thanks for joining us on tonight's edition of The Big Story. My name is Sharon Momanyi, sitting in for Yvonne Okwara Matole. Now tonight, Parliament resumes and yet exhibits a not-so-promising tone of unity with regards to formation of House committees and leadership in the National Assembly. National Super Alliance has yet again experienced another fallout among its affiliate parties. This follows the contested appointment of Suba South Member of Parliament John Mbadi as the minority leader and Suna East Member of Parliament Junet Mohammed as the minority whip. NASA Coast MPs, led by Suleiman Dori of Msambweni, protested over the list, citing discrimination. Mbadi, among other ODM leaders, have however defended their selection.
Now, after the leadership has been resolved from our side, is to go ahead and form a selection committee. This selection committee will be now busy placing members in various committees. So whether NASA is going to be part and parcel of vetting the CSS or not, I think that one will communicate after we've met as a leadership and we make a resolution. But for now,
we have House leadership in both houses officially communicated. It may not please everyone, but I think, again, our members must understand that these positions are few and not all of us can sit. We probably are all qualified for this position.
And joining me now is the Soy Member of Parliament, Honorable Caleb Kositany, and his Ndhiwa counterpart, Honorable Martins Ogindo. But first, let's hear from our lead reporter, Sophia Wanuna, on the events that surrounded Parliament opening today. Good evening to you, Sophia.
Good evening, Sharon. It's great to have you with us on the show tonight. So Parliament resuming today. And this resumption, remember, Sharon, coming after Parliament had, taken a break just after resuming for a day, and this is slightly over a month ago. And even this time around, they're only back in session for slightly over a week before again they go on yet another holiday recess, which will be about 10 weeks long. They will be resuming in February. But the significance of today's resumption of activities in Parliament was, as you mentioned at the top of the show, them being able to, for the first time, at least in the House, hand in that list of the top leadership in both houses of Parliament. Remember, in the last time when they'd resumed, they had handed in a list, but a controversial one that was even rejected by the principal, the main principal, who has been the presidential candidate, Raila Odinga, saying that it wasn't one that had been agreed on a consultative platform. But today, finally, a list that at least we've not heard the principals disagree on, naming John Mbadi as the minority leader in the National Assembly. It also has Junet Mohammed as the whip, in the minority whip in the National Assembly, who will be deputized by Chris Wamalwa. Then in the Senate, you have Wetangula Moses as the minority leader and deputized by James Orengo. In that list, you also have as the minority whip, Mutula Kilonzo Jr. However, this list, whilst the leadership has given it a nod, the top leadership, a section of the NASA partners, and this is from the coastal city, the coastal parliamentary group led by the chairman, Suleiman Dori, flanked by Mishimboko earlier today, came out to say they do not approve this list. They reject it because they had made proposals concerning regional balance as well as gender balance that they feel in this list been fronted have not been considered by the coalition. And so they're saying they do not recognize it and use the word that now we have come to so famously know in terms of the NASA team, resist the list. Unless changes are made, they said they will not support NASA's agenda in the House. So that is an issue emerging within the ranks of NASA in as far as their leadership is concerned. But a number of issues as well in terms of the in-tray for the National Assembly, for the Senate, but again for a very short time before they yet again take a recess. But the big question is, what about the participation in the committees of Parliament that there is yet to be made a clear way forward. What we've heard from the members today is that they are waiting their leadership to communicate. For instance, on the Committee on Appointments, which is if President Kenyatta, for instance, decides to make changes on his cabinet, there has to be a Committee on Appointments that is set up, which has to have membership from the opposition as well. And on that, they say they're yet to wait for direction. Other very critical and crucial committees is a Public Accounts Committee that is always headed by at least the opposition. That's Jubilee. Despite their numbers in the House, they cannot go ahead and, execute business in the House, in that committee, without the participation of NASA and as far as the conglomeration of parties is concerned. So the Public Accounts Committee, the Public Investments Committee as well, another crucial one that is headed by the opposition, is one we're still waiting to see what will be the way forward, what will the membership agree on in as far as that is concerned. But what we've heard largely before this, Sharon, is that they are keen to ensure they do not in any way support business ongoing because according to them, they said despite even yesterday Uhuru Kenyatta being sworn in as president for a second term, they do not recognize him as a legitimate president. In fact, Raila Odinga declaring that they will be swearing him in, and I say swearing him quote unquote, on Jamhuri Day, the 12th of December. And so the days ahead in terms of the political landscape, we wait to see how all will play out. But Jubilee, in as far as the numbers in both houses, having a significant majority. Sharon.
Sophia, and one could argue that is the hardware of the formation of the House business committees and just setting the framework right before they get down to it, to the business of the House. What are we looking at in terms of the entry that this parliament has? What are among the critical issues, the ones they get down to it, that Kenyans would be looking to this House to legislate?
The most significant, Sharon, at this particular point, and people at the counties will be concerned with, and the county governments, is the budget, because that has to be passed. And this has a process by which there is an involvement of all sides. And so that is the most crucial issue. Of course, there are other motions and issues that have been brought before Parliament that will be considered. And as far as funding the counties, that's the fuel that drives the counties to be able to have them, the new governments, the 47 governments, to function as far as the promises they made to the people and the requirements, the necessities of the various counties. Those budgets must first be approved at the county level. And so with a national government that's not functioning, it will present an issue for the counties as well. It trickles down because that budget-making process, that passage of the monies that will trickle down to the county level begins there. But also, Sharon, you remember an issue that has been outstanding from the passage of the Kenya Constitution 2010 and the promulgation of the same, is that not more than two-thirds gender rule, where it has been an imbalance. That continues to be. It has been there since the 2013 Uhuru Kenyatta government was sworn in. The efforts that have been made so far have not borne fruit to put in place a mechanism that implements and operationalizes the not more than two-thirds gender rule. So we await to see if this parliament will be able to finally come up with such a mechanism that will be agreeable to all parties, but most importantly, meet the law requirement and meet that rule requirement.
Right,
Sharon.
many thanks, Sophia Wanuna, our lead reporter there, just giving us the intrigues around the reconvening of Parliament today and just what are some of the issues that Kenyans will be looking at this Legislative House. And of course, later on, just in a few minutes, I shall be getting into that discussion with our guest tonight. That is Honorable Caleb Kositany, the Member of Parliament from Soy constituency, and his Ndhiwa counterpart, Honorable Martins Ogindo. Now, the Constitution of Kenya empowers Parliament to establish committees to enable it to perform its functions. Committees consist of a group of members appointed to both houses to examine issues in more detail than is possible if the matter was considered in the House. So let us appreciate why we need these committees, and we just want to look at the role of these committees. And as you can see there, just highlighting a bit of that. And some of the roles includes deliberating on proposed government expenditure, and consideration of legislation, checking on annual reports and examination of government administration, approval of appointments, and which is one that we expect to be happening sometime soon when President Uhuru Kenyatta constitutes his cabinet for the second term, and approval of appointments, that's what we've talked about, and removal from office of public officers, as well as general oversight. And also some of the other roles include endorsing borrowing by the national government. Also what Sophia has highlighted, budget issues, is one of the tasks that Parliament will be sitting down on soon, and the link between the National Assembly and the electorate. So let's also look at why having these various committees in the National Assembly. And the reason for this is to facilitate the division of labor and enable detailed forum than a house, because these committees then can all sit concurrently and look at different issues in detail, different issues as categorized differently from the committees, and also offer a more practicable forum than a house, and also form an avenue for public communication. So that is why this is crucial, and why there has been that urgency to have both the majority coalition and the minority coalition forward their nominees to these various House committees. And we've seen that the minority coalition is yet to do that, although today they did forward their names for the House leadership. And right now, we want to get into that discussion. Just to remind you, the guest we have tonight is the Member of Parliament from Soi constituency, that is Honorable Caleb Kositany, and the Ndiwa constituency Member of Parliament, Martins Ogindo. And many thanks, Waheshimiwa, for joining me this evening for this discussion. And I just want to start with you, Honorable Ogindo, because that list that was forwarded for the House leadership today has come amidst and has been received really with a lot of resistance, so to speak, especially from the counterparts from COAST, talking about representation, regional, and others also speak of gender representation in the sense that out of the 4 leaders proposed, there's not a single woman in that. What do you have to say about this?
Thank you so much for inviting me here. I was struggling to hear what you're saying, but I think I picked a few. It's good that the House committee is being formed. And we said this from the beginning, that even if you have a tyranny of numbers in the House, that House is made of majority and minority. Just like you have 2/3 of a cake, you cannot say it is a full cake until the other third is there. So what is going on now is healthy for the nation. Today we submitted the House leadership from the NASA coalition after a long consultation. And of course, when a family is dividing portions, there could be some emotional reactions. That does not mean it will not settle down. And also the issue of gender, regional balances, all these were considered. And remember, we still have some slots to consider, especially the Public Accounts Committee, the chair, and also Investment Committee. So what I'm happy with is that what we ought to have done a long time ago, if the Jubilee government had a positive attitude of saying we cannot do it alone, we are now doing it, however late, but we are now doing it. As for the committees, our minority leader, Honorable Mbadi, is working on it, and the other team. And I know the select committee will be on, and that select committee will do the appointments of various oversight committees and also departmental committees. So today was a good future for Kenyans. And I want to reiterate that it was because the Jubilee side has seen that they could not do more on themselves alone. They needed also the minority side to join in order to serve this republic.
And just to stay with you, Honorable Ogindo, what does this mean that now you have submitted this list? It means you're ready to get down to the House business. Whilst earlier you had committed to not give these names owing to the fact that you do not recognize the legitimacy of this government. So what does this mean that on one hand you are ready to get down to business and on the other say that you do not recognize this government? Why the change of heart in submitting this list?
I think it's clear that we don't recognize the selection of President Uhuru Kenyatta. As members of Assembly, this is another arm. And what we said clearly from the word go is that let us do business as a National Assembly, not a Jubilee parliamentary group. What spoiled everything, and I said it, was the negative attitude, which was there from the beginning. And it was said even to the highest office that we can go alone and we can do what we want to do without you. That is what stalled everything from the beginning. We attended, we were trained, and we were ready to go. But when this attitude came, they could form business committees on their own, pass legislations, and just move on. We had to pull out. I think that is what was the contention then. If they came back and realized that they can do it alone, then we will come along. But as for the legitimacy, I think I have said it.
All right, and Honorable Kositan, going back to business now, in a house that really does not, the opposition not recognizing, the legitimacy of the government, does this really have any ramifications to you as the majority coalition in the House or in the National Assembly? Does this have any ramifications in how the conduct of the House continues?
Thank you, Sharon. I think ODM or NASA, for that matter, have realized that their boycott or their so-called boycott and resistance of parliamentary affairs, serves them no good. So we are happy that today they have brought in a list, although they, again, within their own coalition, disputed the legitimacy of the list or the fact that they held a parliamentary group meeting and agreed. What transpired today in Parliament, we were also, as Jubilee, we were shocked. But what is even more shocking is that NASA have no respect for the women leaders they have, or they don't consider them fit enough to be leaders, whereby they've submitted a list of 4 senior members to run the affairs of the NASA coalition in Parliament, and not a single woman was appointed. We have seen the Coastal Parliamentary Group have issued a statement. They gave the members who spoke in Parliament gave very strong views against the list, and they addressed a press conference in Parliament. So this is actually what we have been saying, that the so-called boycott of Parliament was really not a boycott, a genuine boycott, but it was trying to sort out issues that they had within the NASA coalition. And you can see their issues are not over yet. And we, as the majority, we are ready to do business. We had given the deadline. It is good that we gave them a deadline that by opening of business in Parliament today, they ought to have submitted their list. They have submitted their list. They have their disputes, and that is purely a NASA affair. We are not going to get into it. But what we want to urge them is now let's the various committees be formed, the appointment committee be formed, and let's business of Parliament start running.
Right, and Honorable Kositan, you bring the issue of how the opposition is not taking note of that important aspect of gender representation. And whilst you enjoy the tyranny of numbers in the House, in the last Parliament, time and again, the majority failed to pass that implementation of the 2/3 gender rule. Is this something that this Parliament is keen to do, even with that enjoyment of numbers that you do have?
This 2/3 gender rule is actually a matter that has been in and out of Parliament for quite a time, for some time now. Last 5 years, it didn't materialize. It never saw the light of day. But there are issues with this passing of this rule, because how do you pass it? What are the cost implications to the economy? And how are we going to implement it? So those are things that are going to come to Parliament once we get back to business. And I think we'll urge members, both male and female, to debate this matter and see how the best way to go forward with it, and whether we really need to go that route or there is another route that we need to go. I think this is something that will come up and we'll debate it when it comes.
All right, and Honorable Owino, just speaking about the interest of the people as the coalition of NASA seeks to represent, and speaking about the People's Assembly, basing this on Article 1 of the Constitution. And one would argue that on one hand would want to follow the rule of law on this aspect, but it is this rule of law that saw President Uhuru Kenyatta sworn in yesterday in an event that was officiated by the Chief Justice. Would this then not be you breaching the law, and on the other hand, trying to use the same law, to swear in the opposition leader Raila Odinga next week?
No, there's no contradiction at all. But let me react to Honorable what he has said. NASA does not respect women. To me, that is a pronouncement that has no merit. In fact, the nomination of women to the Parliament, both houses, the Senate and the Assembly, we have many women nominated. And I want to deflate the notion that people should only jostle for positions. No, that should not be the case. The role of a member of Parliament is to keenly look at the legislation agendas and participate in the Assembly or in the Senate. So it shouldn't be taken that if you don't have a position, then you are not respected. That is not true. In fact, we should have an attitude that if you don't get it, you can still play a greater role. Not everybody can be number one there or in the front line. Some people have to play the back line, and it's as important as you are in the front line. As for the People's Assembly, it is in the Constitution, as you say rightly, Article 1, and we are not out of the law. What Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga said is within the law. So what I would invite our fellow Kenyans is to look all the rights in the law and just be sober as we go along it. As for the details that will be given to you, I don't want to divulge it now.
All right. Okay, we shall continue with that, especially with what the role of the legislature is now in moving the country forward, which everyone agrees is where the country is, the point at which we are now. But let's take a short commercial break now here on The Big Story, but we continue with this discussion when we come back from this short break. Don't go too far.